Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for this important discussion. I also want to thank our panelists, especially for being here. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that we will be recording this event. It will be posted tomorrow on our YouTube channel. Throughout the panel, if you have a question, we ask that you please submit it using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And after our initial discussion, we will break for questions. And now I'd like to turn things over to Shannon. Shannon, go ahead.
Thanks, Caitlin, and welcome to this panel. I'm excited to introduce the panelists, starting with Mark Hyman, the director of the Shirley Povich Center for Sports Journalism, and next, Christine Brennan, who is an award-winning national sports columnist for USA Today and a commentator for CNN. Christine is also a best-selling author and a nationally known speaker, as well as a leader within the Association of Women in Sports Media. Our next panelist, Brenda Freese, is the head coach of the University of Maryland women's basketball team and has led the team to a national championship, as well as 3 Final Four appearances and 12 conference titles. 2 Maryland alums are also on this panel. Crystal Langhorne, a 2008 graduate of the University of Maryland, was a former forward and center for the Seattle Storm and now serves as the team's director of community engagement for Force for Change. She played for Maryland from 2004 to 2008, winning a national championship in 2006, before being drafted 6th overall by the Washington Mystics. And then last but certainly not least, Christy Winters-Scott is a 1990 graduate of the University of Maryland and is currently a college basketball color analyst for ESPN, Fox Sports, and Big Ten Network. She has been a lead analyst since 2016 and played basketball for the University of Maryland from 1986 to 1990. And now I'll turn it over to Mark for the remainder of the panel.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Really appreciate that introduction. And again, thank you to this panel, just a wonderful panel to talk about a very important issue that I think is not well understood. So it's an important conversation, and we're glad we're having it at the Povich Center. So I thought we would begin with some context so that we understand the kind of historical nature of this issue. And let's begin with this slide. So as we know, in June of 1972, Title IX was enacted, and for the first time, all sports programs receiving federal funding were mandated to provide equal opportunity to girls and women. In 1974, more than 90% of women's college teams were coached by women. And if you look at the chart, the first date on the left side of the chart is 1978. By 1978, as we see, that percentage has slipped to 58%. By 1987, for the first time, less than half of women's college teams were coached by women. And for the past 10 to 12 years, that percentage has hovered in the 40 to 45% range. And this data was provided by the NCAA. So we have one more chart that I think is important for us to see. This is the current or relatively current breakdown by sport, by women's sport, of the percentage of women coaching these teams. So as you can see, there's quite a range. Field hockey, 95% of women's field hockey teams coached by women, lacrosse 83%, golf 77%, women's basketball 59%, gymnastics 58%, and then on the other end of the spectrum, cross country 23%, swimming 14%, and if you're a women's water polo player, the chances of you having a woman as a coach are that they're quite remote. Only 12% of women's water polo teams are coached by women. And the data here was provided by the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport at the University of Minnesota. And they really are the gold standard with regard to study of these issues. So a shout out to the Tucker Center at the University of Minnesota. So just a few other data points before we begin. Women coaching men's teams is quite a rarity. 3% of men's NCAA teams are coached by women. And I was on a call with Nicole Lavoie, the director of the Tucker Center, earlier this week, and we were talking about men's basketball and whether there are any women coaching men's basketball currently in the NCAA. And we decided that there are no women who are head basketball coaches on the men's side. And there is only one that we could find who is serving as an assistant coach. Her name is Ednisha Curry, and she is an assistant at the University of Maine. And I believe Caitlin has just put her bio in the chat box. So with that introduction, let's go to the panel. I mean, the obvious question is why? Why 50 years after the passage of Title IX are 60% of women's teams coached by men? Let's begin with Brenda Freese.
Well, thanks for having me and our entire panel. You know, I think the first thing that jumps to mind and is just the demands are so high. And I could probably, you know, give a personal story, you know, of my own, you know, obviously to, you know, I'm really fortunate and very grateful to have been the head women's coach here at Maryland for the last 19 years. But, you know, the time constraints and what you're juggling day in and day out is very high. You know, I have twin boys, a lot of people know, and one of my twins at 2.5 was diagnosed with cancer. And, you know, I remember at that time, you know, our family, you know, was kind of thrown into a whirlwind. All of a sudden, you know, you have the family responsibilities. Your son has to get up to treatment. And so it can become a lot. Fortunately for me, you know, I had, you know, a husband that was in a role to be able to take on those responsibilities. You know, we had family in-laws that lived 10 minutes from us that were retired. So, you know, I could become in that situation, you know, the first, second, or third option when I needed to become that. But not everybody is as fortunate as I was at that time. I think it's things like that when you talk about, you know, for some people, it's just the time demands. It's if you're juggling a lot of things, you know, within your job and your home front that I think can really reduce the number of women when you're having to choose between your family and your career, I think can be extremely tough.
Christine?
Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks to all of you for being here. It's an honor to be on this panel. And as I said to the group earlier, I'm honored that you would allow a Northwestern Wildcat in your midst. But as Brenda said, only because she beat the Wildcats the other day. Otherwise, I would have been out the door. So thank you. And thanks for dealing with this very important topic with this terrific panel. As I said, wonderful people. I'm honored, as I said, to join you. You know, I think what Brenda said is true. The kind of the traditional roles of the wife and the husband, the male and the female certainly hold. Clearly, in Brenda's case, that story resonates. I also think there's other factors at play, and I'm sure our panel will deal with all of these issues, but a couple come to mind, Mark. And one is that these jobs now are plum jobs, and they're paying a lot of money. And when you are paying in 6 figures for a lacrosse coach, women's, of course, we're talking women's sports here in all cases tonight, when these jobs are coveted. And by and large, you have white men as athletic directors at universities. And this is not against white men. It's not bashing white men. We love guys. We love a lot of these people have made these university athletic departments what they are and deserve great credit for it. But studies have shown over and over that when you're hiring, you tend to hire someone who looks like you. So if we mostly have white guys running athletic departments in our country, which we do, then the odds are if they're going to try to hire someone, they may well hire someone who looks exactly like them. And I think that's a piece of it. And again, these jobs are really great jobs to have. And it's not just women's basketball, although of course we've seen that. And Gino Auriemma comes to mind. And again, this is not about bashing Gino or anyone. This is about looking at an issue in 2021 that is so important because it's about creating role models for our daughters, our granddaughters, our nieces, the girl next door, and letting them know that sports can be a career for them, not just in playing, and maybe sports medicine, sports law, administration, but also coaching. And as wonderful Billie Jean King says, if you can see it, you can be it. And all of a sudden, if you're being coached by men every step of the way, are there questions about whether I could do this job? Then you have wonderful people like Brenda Freese, who's hired all women as her assistant coaches, or Muffet McGraw, when she was at Notre Dame, spoke eloquently about this. And you know that those opportunities are there. But I think the NCAA and all these universities need to do a much better job. But those are a few thoughts to start off about a problem that I think is a very big issue, especially as we look at the 50th anniversary of Title IX coming up in June of 2022. The next 50 years of Title IX, I think this should be one of the top priorities.
Christy.
Just echoing what everyone said about being thrilled to be involved in this timely conversation, to say the least. For me, I kind of going to piggyback on what Brenda said and also what Christine said. So I coached in college Division I level for 10 years, and I was kind of on track to maybe become a head coach in 4 or 5 years. I don't know. But when my oldest son was born, he's 19 now. My oldest son was born in December in my last year of coaching there at Maryland with Coach Weller. And you know, it was daunting, to say the least, because it was right in the middle. I was an assistant coach at the time, so it was right in the middle of the season. And she stepped down in that spring, so it was really kind of it was a whirlwind emotionally anyway, as a new mom of a 2-month-old baby, and then have to make the decision, okay, she's stepping down. Should I stay in this, or should I step away and be a full-time mom? So there was that conundrum for me as a mom. My husband was working full-time, so it wasn't like he was going to be home. My mom had just recently retired, like within a year, and I didn't want to leave her with a newborn. It was just all these things, because there's like guilt all around with that. Like, you just worked your entire life, and here's a newborn. Like, I didn't want to do that. So for me, it was quite something. So I actually took 2 years off, and I was going to get back into it, and then found out that we were having our second child. So, and they're about 21 months apart, and I actually did get back into coaching. I was assistant coach at Georgetown, and it was tough for me. And I thought I could tap into, you know, being an athlete and, you know, just lean into it. You can do this, and boom, boom, boom. And I'd get at the airport and hear somebody say, "Mom," and I would just get hollow. I'm like, maybe this isn't the right thing for me right now. So right after that, my high school job opened up, my alma mater. So when that happened, I stepped away from college coaching because I kept seeing their 2 little faces in the window with my freshly retired mom after 1.5 years now, not freshly, but you know, I'd be gone for 4 or 5 days out of the week. And I had 2 littles, and they were 2 and 10 months at the time. And so for me, it was a personal decision to, you know, stay in coaching at the high school level, but, you know, have the juice boxes and the goldfish in the gym with the kids with me. So I also think what Christine said about being a plum job, it is. And I think it would be quite something to see as many women, like 40% of the coaches in men's Division I basketball to be women. That will be the day. You've seen a couple of things happening in the NBA where they have hired women. Christy Tolliver, obviously an alum from Maryland, won the championship in 2006 with the Terps, but has won on every single level. And, you know, she's been an assistant coach with the Washington Wizards, and there are at least 12 other women who are coaching in the NBA. And then you look at the SEC, where there are 7 African-American women as head coaches in that conference. So, I mean, the representation is definitely something that is meaningful, but also I think, you know, as Brenda could say as well, just being a female leader, I think that speaks volumes to our young girls. And, you know, just retrospectively thinking back to being a high school coach, I think that those are the prime years to have those eyes on you as a leader. And those are the prime years that the representation truly matters, I think, as they see themselves. I mean, those teenage years are very impressionable. And, I've got to coach my daughter. She's a senior this year, and I'm in the office here. She has a volleyball game in about an hour. So, I mean, there's the juggle of it, but it can be done, and you can do it at any level. And I think that's why it's very important to have this discussion, because it wasn't like I quit coaching. I stopped coaching at the Division I level because of the travel keeping me away from my littles at that time. And then, now I'm almost an empty nester. So it's like, I don't know what that will look like, but there's always a decision to be made, but it doesn't mean that you put it away and shelf it. That means you do it in a different way. And I think that's kind of what I am doing personally, but there's still work to be done to have everything be accepted the same way it's accepted on the women's side, have it be accepted like that percentage-wise on the men's side as well.
So Crystal, we're putting together a pretty good list here of explanations, starting with the demands of the job, particularly when a family has children, and then the compensation. These are generally well-paid positions. And then the point that Christine made, that the people in a position to do the hiring typically are white men. Only 12% of Division I athletic directors are women. Is there anything else to add to that list? And if not, which factor do you think is most important?
Yeah, I think they all really hit it like right on target. But like you said, the people doing these hiring, they're white, they're male, and I think there needs to be an emphasis on diversity. You really need to think about who you're hiring and how it's going to impact your organization. And I think teams and schools really need to start focusing on that. And it's going to help girls for the future when they see, like they said, when you see a coach that's a woman, you're like, I can do this. I think it's difficult. Like they said, when you have male coaches, you don't see anyone who looks like you in this position. So it's very important to have diversity in these positions.
In the WNBA, more men or women head coaches, would you say?
There's still majority men, and it's still majority white. So the league is, I think they're trying to do better, but we still have a long way to go.
What's the impact of that? As a Black woman playing, let's say for a white man, can you quantify in any way whether that makes a difference, whether it would be different if you were playing for a woman?
I've played for men, I've played for women, I've played for Black coaches, I've played for white coaches, but I think it's important for young people to see people who look like them, and to see where you don't just have to be a player. You can be a coach, you can be a GM, you could be director of community engagement for the Seattle Storm. So just having all these different positions, people can see there's so many options where you can go into, and just opportunities. It's all about opportunities for young people.
Well, let's talk about the importance of mentors and seeing women in positions of power and authority. And let's talk about it through the eyes of the panelists and your experience. Starting with Brenda. Brenda grew up, I believe, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, played high school basketball at Washington High School. And I learned about 8 minutes ago that she played for a male coach in high school. Then went on to the University of Arizona and played for a superstar college player who had gone on to coaching, June Olkowski, who had been a star at Rutgers and won a national championship there. Brenda, talk to us about your experience as a young person playing for a male coach and in college, a woman, and how that informs your thinking about this issue.
Yeah, I was probably fortunate because I had great experiences within both. My high school coach, we won a state title. So, we connected through the passion and the love of the game. And he's still a huge mentor of mine. But I do think, when I got to college, and I was fortunate, June Olkowski recruited me. Joan Bombazzini as well was there at my time. So I had two female head coaches. And, at the time, when I first was coming out of high school, I thought I wanted to be a high school coach because, I had such a great experience in high school. And then all of a sudden I got to college and had these two great women coaching me. And it did open my eyes to, what, I think actually I can do this at a much higher level. I want to be able to coach it at the Division I level. So I do think, without me even knowing or understanding it at the time when I was in college, that impression was huge to be able to have, and June Olkowski was a young, energetic, fiery coach that, I think there's some traits there that I, have modeled after. And, I do think that, having, their mentorship, every single day in college, definitely had a tremendous impact to me being able to get into the coaching ranks.
Now, all of these, if I'm correct, all of your assistants currently are women. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that a purposeful decision, or is that just the three most qualified people?
I've had male assistant coaches, in my time. It kind of evolved, and into this season where we do have an all-female staff. One of the things I will say, it's probably been, I've had a lot of great staffs, but this one has really ranked up there, when you just talk about what we've been able to do during a pandemic, and just the symmetry and the connection has been really seamless this season. So, I love the fact that, our players are getting these great, strong women, strong female role models each and every day.
Now, as the panel certainly knows, Muffet McGraw, former coach at Notre Dame, when she was basically her exit interview from the job, she made a very powerful statement about the issue we're talking about tonight. And at about that time, I guess a year earlier, before she announced her retirement, she announced that she would no longer be hiring men as assistant coaches, that she felt strongly that those jobs should go to women. And I want to kind of take the temperature of the panel on that issue. Crystal, what do you think about that? Do you think that the staffs of women's basketball teams, that the default position should be, let's hire a woman if we can?
I actually spoke to a male coach after she spoke about that, and he was just like, I'm coaching, and what about us? And I'm like, you're not a marginalized group. So, it's just different. If someone wants to take up that position and that's what they want to do, and they want to hire women who don't make as much, who it's harder for them to get jobs. If you look at the pandemic, it's mostly women losing jobs. So, when you look at things like that, I wasn't upset with it when she said that.
Let's talk a little bit about your basketball kind of growing up period. So you grew up in South Jersey, in Willingboro, New Jersey, and you were like an all-world high school player, high school All-American. What was your high school coach, a man or a woman?
He was a man. He was a Black man, and he was a great coach. Like I said, I've had men, I've had women, and it's been different. It's different personality styles, but I've enjoyed playing for both. And I've had great coaches on every level that I've been on.
Okay, let's talk to the journalist. And the journalist in this case is also an athlete, because Christine Brennan, many people don't know this, played 6 varsity sports in high school growing up in Toledo. So Christine, what was your experience as a young athlete? Were you playing for men or for women? Were you seeing women in positions of power and authority in high school?
Mark, first of all, I have to say you are correct, a 6-sport athlete in high school. But this was the days when we had no cell phones and no answering machines. and no DVRs. And I think Abraham Lincoln was president. So it was a few years ago. Certainly it was the days before specialization too. So I literally could run from first doubles in tennis at Ottawa Hills High School in the suburbs of Toledo, Ohio, a relatively small high school, to play field hockey and, varsity field hockey. And then it was basketball and volleyball in the winter and softball and track and field in the spring. I didn't do all 6 sports every year, but I did the majority all 4 years. But again, it was because girls sports was just not, I graduated from high school in 76, graduated from Northwestern in 80, and then 81 with my master's. So, I'm placing it in that time period. It's a different time, and thankfully it's different, although it was cool to be able to have the variety, which so many young women now who play sports just can't. You just can't do anything close to that. And of course, men as well, young men. So, but in that case, believe it or not, especially freshman, sophomore year, there was one coach, Mark, coaching all those sports. One coach, Sandy Osterman. We're friends. She's doing great in the Toledo area, and she coached all those sports. So, and this was a high school, by the way, that every parent expected their daughter as well as their son to go to college. Very high expectations, a wonderful suburb. And yet, to show how ingrained the sexism was and the lack of interest in girls' sports, even when they thought they had interest in girls' sports, there was one woman coaching everything. So Sandy Osterman, Miss O, was our role model, and also just a great friend and so much fun to play for. Then the tennis team was coached by, another year or two, was coached by our a history teacher, Bob O'Connell, who I loved and adored just as much as I the same respect that I had and adoration for Sandy Osterman. And then there was maybe another coach that would come in, and help out with some of these other teams. But it was Sandy Osterman, and I've written about her. And there's a book called Coach, which is pretty cool, an anthology, and I'm in it. And you'll like this, when they emailed and said, "Do you write about one of your coaches?" And I said, "Well, okay, there's only one." And it must sound for people listening, it must just sound like another planet. And it was, right? I mean, Brenda, obviously you were coming along later. Christy, you were coming along later, but it was changing and evolving. And that's the beauty of Title IX and where our country is and how we have changed so dramatically, really in the blink of an eye in our nation's history. But yeah, that was it. And my dad was at every game as well as my mom. And most parents just didn't even go, and most dads couldn't because they were working. My dad owned his own business, so he made sure to show me how important my sports were to him and to my mom and our family. So that's very, very, very positive experience. And then I just played intramurals at Northwestern. I could have walked on the basketball team, but I would have been sitting the bench in Iowa City on a Saturday night. And I thought I could do intramurals and have, I just love playing. I didn't need to be in a big arena or anything like that.
And we should acknowledge the important role that your dad played in your sports life. Your dad, Jim, about whom you wrote a book, Best Seat in the House, which is a wonderful book that I recommend to our audience, which really tells the story about how important he was and how sports really was a very important part of your relationship with him over many years. So.
Well, that's true. And again, this was a time when girls were not being encouraged to play or love sports. Growing up in the, the 60s and 70s, most of my friends, my girlfriends, young girls that we play with, we're not playing sports. And the boys, I'm tall, I'm almost 6 feet tall. So, the boys wanted to play sports with me. They picked me first for baseball. And again, back then there was no soccer for boys or girls. So we were just playing, which there were a lot of positives to that. Just playing in a field or in someone's front yard or down the street and just making up our own games. So I was there. I was the only girl with the boys, and they picked me first usually because I was, I guess, coordinated enough. I could play anything and love sports and couldn't get enough of it. And then we started going to Michigan football games, University of Toledo football games. My dad was the Pied Piper with season tickets. But through it all, Mark, he never said no once. Well, almost every girl in America was being told no. I was being told yes by my mom and dad. And what a wonderful, how lucky was I? I could get tears in my eyes right now thinking about it.
Mm. Christy, your story is great. You grew up in Northern Virginia. I think your high school team was undefeated in your senior year. You go on to Maryland and play for Chris Weller. And now you've had this amazing coaching career at many levels. I wondered if you would talk about that. Do you feel you're coaching high school now at your alma mater? Do you feel the weight of being a mentor and a role model and a authority figure for the girls who you are coaching?
I don't know if it's really a weight, but I think it's definitely a responsibility that I care a lot about. I'm not pressured by that responsibility. I think motherhood has molded me to be strong in that way. But with that being said, I had a female coach here at South Lakes, and yes, we went 29-0, won the state championship by 2 points. Senior year, it was a crazy game, and it was amazing. But then to come back here, the team was 0-21 before I took over the team when I left Georgetown. So it was like a total 180. So I'm like, we need to just win one game and I'm good. Like, that's it. Like, so there was really no pressure to, come back and go back to 29-0. It was 3 wins, 4 wins. And then I think we went 500. And then my 4th year here, we made it back to regionals the first time, since when I was here. So it was a lot of pride in that. So I don't think it was a lot of pressure or the weight of that. It was like, this is not okay. Like, we're not here to just, have cupcakes and do layup drills and go home. Like, no, we have something to represent, and it's the community. So I think for me personally, like with the summer camps and now being here long enough to have the kids who have come through our summer camps to be a part of our program, I think to me is just a tremendous sense of pride in that way. And then, like I said, Jill English was our coach here. And then to play for a Hall of Fame coach like Chris Weller at Maryland, she molded me also in that way, not to accept just any old effort. I think that, I know what it takes to win because of her. I know what it takes to win because of Jill English. And it wasn't necessarily, something tactical, even though I do run some of the same things that we ran at Maryland, some of the same drills. Some of our inbounds plays are called terps. But I think for me personally, I never thought that I would be back here. Sometimes I pinch myself. Our son graduated from here. Daughter is graduating in a couple of months, and then we have a 9th grader in the fall coming through South Lake. So it's just been this total full circle situation. But as a coach, I think motherhood has groomed me to become the coach that South Lakes needed at this time. And I am always going to be grateful for the opportunity to do that. I feel like I say the same things to the players as I say at home to my kids. I think a lot of that is life lessons and the tutelage that comes from motherhood, and just the encouraging mentality that you have to have as a coach, and understanding as a former athlete what that self-talk sounds like. And it's up to us as coaches, I think, especially as female coaches and moms, to have that self-talk in our young people, especially young women, be positive and be encouraging and be next play. Things aren't going to always be okay. Things aren't going to always be smooth. You're going to turn the ball over. So let's not go and make another mistake by fouling or something like that. Like, there's always something better you can do. So I just think for me personally, it's been a blessing and a treat to not only coach the game, but, to be in this community and to have kids that I've seen grow up, not just through camps and through our program, but friends of my kids, and coaching them, and, them having, confetti flying all over them, and, just freezing that moment in my brain. I think those are the things that I won't forget. But I think that's what you want. If you're a coach, you want your players to be successful. And if you're a mom, you want your kids to be successful. So I think that's where those two roles for me personally intertwine.
So this problem we're talking about tonight is intractable. We know that because we're 50 years out from Title IX. If anything, it's as bad as it's ever been. So there are no easy fixes. We're aware of that. But we have an opportunity here. We've got 4 really smart people who are living this life. Let's brainstorm. If you had superpowers, you're president of the NCAA, you're Mark Emmert times 10, and you can change something. You can make something different than it is now to address this problem. What would it be? And let's pick on Crystal first.
It's a tough question. I would say, I guess, to bring more of an excitement to women's sports. I think to get pay equity would help. It would bring more excitement. I would bring more people to the game, and starting women girls at a young level, getting them ready for the next level with coaching and things like that. It doesn't start when you're 25, it starts when you're younger, with your mindset. So I would say just getting young girls excited about sports, and then kind of generating that into everything else. And it's more money. I think more money will get young girls excited about sports. So I think that would help.
Great. Who wants to volunteer? Brenda, one thing to really affect change.
I'm going to kind of steal what Christine said at the beginning, is just, and I think you gave the percentage of, there's only 12% of women that are athletic directors. And, I'm really lucky. When I got hired here at Maryland, who hired me was a female athletic director, Debbie Yao. And I really believe, so much of my success having her mentorship, you have to remember, I was only in my 4th year as a head coach. And she helped me every single step of the way. So I think, increasing that pool of, first we've got to get high quality ADs and ADs that, there's a blend of diversity, and there's a lot more women athletic directors, because I think they're more than capable to be able to be in those positions of power. And then I think then you can attract even more female women's coaches, in our game.
Christine?
Well, you've asked for one. I have part 1 and part 2 of one answer. There's something called the Rooney Rule in the NFL. It is debatable how successful it is, but the rule, named after the Pittsburgh Steelers owner, the Rooney family, Art Rooney, I believe it was. But the rule says that for a head coaching position, that at least one Black person, in this case would be a man, obviously, needs to be interviewed for every head coaching job. And the hope, of course, would be that then you would be hiring more Black men to coach in the NFL. Now, we know that is a continuing issue. And as I said, I'm not sure how well it's working or not working. But if I had these superpowers that you are giving us, Mark, I would mandate for every job, basketball, lacrosse, every women's team that is at any university, rowing, whatever. The next head coaching opening, if you've got 3 candidates, 2 candidates, 10 candidates, at least one needs to be a woman. I guess if it's 10 candidates, maybe we say at least a third, maybe even half. I could even go that far if I could be talked into that. Of the candidates need to be women. Now, obviously, in some cases, maybe there aren't a lot of women yet in some of those fields. Water polo, for example, is just alarming and shocking. We'll work on it. Find and convince people, a young water polo player, get her going in the system. These are all things that the NCAA can do. And then, of course, individual universities have to start caring about this. And they basically don't care. They kind of care, and they care a little bit more than they used to, but clearly they've let this go on. And it needs to stop. And then my part 2 of this, the way you start to shame them. You mentioned Nicole Lavoie and of course the Tucker Center at Minnesota. A few years ago, I was giving a speech at an NCAA inclusion convention, and I said, why not give grades? So for all of the opportunities for having women head coaches, every school, all their women's teams, and then rank them and then give them grades on the curve. And if you get an F, publicize it, and D's and whatever. And that's out there, by the way, for anyone who's interested. I think if you just go to Tucker Center and then just do grading women's sports programs or something, you'll find it very easily. They've done this now for 4 or 5 years. And there's a lot of C's, a lot of D's, and there's probably should be a lot more F's, but they grade on the curve. So, and then if I were Mark Emmert, or if I, again, in the position you're giving us for this moment, for this hypothetical, Mark, I would publicize the heck out of that. Now, that's a tough thing to do when you're embarrassing, half of your schools. But I would make sure that it got out there that these number of schools got C's, D's, and F's. And also, by the way, look at the schools who got A's. And I would make that a huge priority. And all of a sudden, the embarrassment factor, prodding these schools, and then a Rooney Rule for making sure you have women candidates for every job, serious, strong women candidates. It's a mindset too. These athletic directors then have to take the plunge and say, okay, I'm going to hire this person. But that's, I guess, from top down, that's what I would suggest.
Christy, you have superpowers.
So I've been told. No, I'm just joking. No, with what everyone has said, I definitely concur. I agree. But at the same time, there needs to be some kind of mental mind bending of the men who are in charge, because if they are in the position to hire, then they need to be hiring women who are most qualified, not their buddy from down the street. I mean, I think there are enough girl dads and best seat in the house dads who understand the importance of women leading women in sports, period. And yes, it would be great to have more women in the roles of athletic directors, but these athletic directors, they keep their jobs for a long stretch of time. So how long can we wait? I think it's more of, yes, we need more women at the table making those decisions, but until then, what's the solution? The solution is to look at the people who are qualified for this position. Let's get some women coaching on the men's side. Let's do that. That's what I would do. If I had a superpower, I would say, all takers, let's bring in your resume. Let's look at them right here. And regardless of gender, let's hire the most qualified coach. Let's hire based on what they have done, based on their record, their character, what they're going to bring to the table as leaders, and not just X's and O's, as leaders, especially these days, on more than just the pandemic. There's racial unjust. There are all kinds of situations that coaches need to be prepared for, and it's scary out here. So I think it has to be something that is I guess, relearned by the people who are making these decisions. It can't just be, well, this is how we've always done it. Well, there needs to be a change made, and the change starts at the top with the decision makers. But yes, we want them to be women, but if they're not, then there needs to be a change mentally in the approach on these hiring processes and who you're actually looking at and why. Why are you looking at these particular people? Because you're good friends, you've known them for 20 years, so position opens up, so you're just going to give them a call instead of looking at the list of people who have qualifications, who have their folding chair pushed up to the table, ready to take that chance professionally. And I think that that opportunity shouldn't be denied to people, regardless of gender, regardless of position, NBA, WNBA, men's and women's college basketball, high school basketball. I mean, I think it's there for the taking. The opportunity is there for leaders to be leaders and to see people, not as a man, not as a woman, but as a qualified coach, period, regardless of color, gender, anything. I think that's the main thing. And if I had superpowers, that's what I would be doing. And I wish I did have those, because I would be super excited to change the way of thinking in that way.
I think it's time to open things up to the audience. So Caitlin, can you help us with that?
Yes, Shannon, did you want to come back and ask your question? There she is.
Sure, thanks, Caitlin. I wanted to go back to the very opening slide, looking at the difference in sports. And Christine, you were talking about water polo, and I'm curious why you think we see these lags in sports like water polo, swimming, and track, especially given the tremendous success that these women's teams have had at the national, international level, and the talent that is there for athletes to go on and become coaches later.
Well, certainly, Shannon, I'll take a stab at it. I think it's a lot of guessing at this point. Certainly basketball, soccer, volleyball, those are entrenched sports. Basketball is our national game, right? And so women playing basketball at an elite level, high level, has been going on for quite a while. I don't know the research for sure, but I'm guessing, water polo, I think, is newer for women. Back at the '84 Olympic Games in LA, which were the first I covered. I was in kindergarten back then, but there was no women's water polo. There was men's water polo, but not women's. So I guess if you have a younger sport in terms of having women being able to play it, you probably have fewer women than who have been around a while and are now coaching it. But I mentioned volleyball. Obviously, that is a sport that is so popular for girls and women, and yet I think it was a year or two ago at the Final Four in volleyball that there was the first woman. The Florida coach is a woman, first woman who had been coaching at the Final Four in a long time. In other words, all the other coaches were men coaching women's volleyball. You also sometimes field hockey, I saw, had a very high percentage of women, lacrosse as well. I also think they've probably done a very good job, lacrosse in particular, of encouraging their own to then coach. Shout out for the Terps nemesis Northwestern in women's lacrosse. You guys have had the better of us recently, but Northwestern's won 7 NCAA titles, and the coach Kelly Amante Hiller. There's a Brenda, you have this too with your staff. And it's so powerful. She, I believe, is now close to 20 people who played for her or were assistants for her are now head coaches in women's lacrosse, which is growing around the country, head college coaches. And obviously, Brenda, you certainly had some of that success as well. And so the longer the sport's been around, the more women are playing it, the more women who can coach it and then want to continue on. So that's my best guess on, at least as an attempt at an answer.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Moving on to some questions from the audience. We have a question from Sophia that I think she'd like Brenda to answer. Do you know if there's been any conversations inside the University of Maryland athletic department on hiring more women's coaches for women's sports?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not privy to those conversations, but I do think we have, quite the blend when you talk about, when you look at our lacrosse team and field hockey and obviously women's basketball, you look at our different sports, but I'm not sure on those conversations.
Another question from someone who asks to remain anonymous talks about the discrepancy in female head coaches in youth sports. And was curious on your thoughts on how we could get women involved at younger level. How does it become more welcoming for moms to coach teams as opposed to just dads?
I'll take that one. Well, first of all, I am a mom and we have 3 children. All of them play basketball, and the boys played baseball early, and Brianna's also playing volleyball, but I never coached them when they were in their younger stages, like with AAU or just the local teams. I never coached them, but I was the cheer mom. I was in the crowd like, let's go. But I think being the high school coach here for my daughter, that has been like twofold in so many ways. But I think that I've heard so many moms say that, I think that's really cool that you're coaching your daughter. And I think that, that's something that we need to see more of. We need more of that, like when they're younger. And I don't know how to instruct them to do that per se, but at the same time, when they drop those kids off at summer camp, it's the moms bringing them. It's the moms, running in a lunch. If a kid forgot a lunch, it's the moms who are are there for these young girls. And I think that when you have opportunity to put your kids in sports, I think you have to just step up and say, I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to do this. I'd like to help out. I know for my younger son, there's a team that they play against and there's a mom coaching. And I love it. You know, I want my son's team to win, but I love that she's coaching them, you know, and it's very uncommon. I think that's the only one I've ever seen through this stretch of years with my 3 kids. So I think it's more of when the opportunity presents itself, when they send out the email, hey, we need some coaches. And it shouldn't be like, honey, do you want to do this? No, you do it. Like, you go and learn about the game, be there for those kids. You're bringing the snacks anyway. So go ahead and coach. I think you just have to step out there and volunteer and put yourself in the trenches that way. And I think if there's one regret, I think I should have probably done that, you know, myself. So I'm telling you guys that this is what you should do. I should have done that because it was such a joy to coach my daughter over the last 4 years.
Crystal, were your youth basketball coaches men or women?
They were men. So I had a different perspective, but one of my AU teams, I had a mom that was really active. I think she helped out with coaching. So just having her as a Black woman, it was definitely a different view. And it helped us players. I think like Christy said, it's really important for people to get out there and just volunteer. I mean, you might be nervous about it. It'll be different, like you're coaching a team, but you know, it's needed. One of my friends, she just helped out with the AAU team and she's a woman. And it helps seeing a woman like, I mean, what this whole call is about. So it's really just putting yourself out there.
Well, I'm giving you superpowers again. And this time we're addressing this disparity in youth sports. One of our PhD candidates, Kate Yanchulis, who's working with me as a teaching assistant, yesterday in class, she was sharing with our students that the percentage of women who are coaching in youth sports is 27%. So there's something going on. There's some cultural barriers, something that's not welcoming about the youth sports adult culture that's preventing women from stepping forward. And what can we do about that? It seems to me that's as important as the issues we're talking about at the college level.
Well, I'll jump in. We might have to wait another 30 or 40 or 50 years. You know, the march of time here is certainly in our favor on every single one of these topics. Obviously, the 5-year-old girl who starts playing sports, what is the world going to look like when she's 55, right? When Title IX is 100? I mean, there will have been woman president after woman president for that person I've just picked out of, you know, it's a hypothetical. We will have more than half women in Congress. You know, the Congress would be more than half female, I'm sure, in the next 50 years. We'll have more than 50 women senators. The Senate will be a majority female, guaranteed. And why do I feel that way? Because I'm certainly aware that we have a society that still has a strong element of sexism and misogyny, and of course racism, and so many other things that have been on display recently, I guess we could say. And why do I feel that way? Because the demographics. Title IX is a tidal wave, and we're seeing it on this screen right now. And when you think of these young women in high school right now playing volleyball, Christy, or whatever they might be doing, their world, I mean, they have no fear. And their moms maybe had no fear, but their grandmothers definitely weren't playing sports. And if they were, it was weird or different, or that's just not cool. And so really in the blink of an eye in our nation's history, we have changed completely how we feel about girls and women playing sports and fallen in love with Title IX. And so I just think, to your question about youth sports, Mark, I just think I'm guessing it's better than it was. I'm guessing there was a point it was probably 0% or 5%. And now it's in the 20s. And it's only going to go up because, as Christy was saying so eloquently, talking about women, driving the carpool, Well, more and more of these moms now in their 20s, 30s, 40s played sports, whereas their moms didn't. And so it's just undeniable. I know I'm very optimistic, but it's absolutely undeniable. The demographics here it's just going to be a tidal wave crashing over the country in terms of women leaders, not just in sports, but in life, politics, education, business, CEO, Fortune 500. We're just at the very beginning, frankly, of this revolution.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Megan in the chat wants to know what can be done to promote more women to interview and try for leadership roles in sports, not just coaches and assistant coaches, but GMs and owners as well.
I can kind of jump in on that. I know everyone saw the news recently of Renee Montgomery becoming an owner for the Atlanta Dream, which is amazing. And she's not going to be the last, like Christine just alluded to. I mean, this is something that, you know, when you hear LeBron James in a post-game interview, bring Renee Montgomery into that fold of conversation, you know that things are changing. That wouldn't have happened, you know, 10, 15 years ago with Michael Jordan, and he's great, but he would not have folded that in. I just think there's a different level of acceptance of women who have opportunities to be in these leadership roles. I know when I was coaching at Georgetown, it was Terry Flanoy, who's now a head coach at Auburn, who was the head coach, Nikki Geckler, Nikki Reed played at Georgetown. She was there on staff, and Alicia Mosley. So it was 4 African-American women, 4 Black women on staff, and 3 of us were moms. And so the dynamic and the opportunity was there in that moment. And it's going to continue to be like that across the board in all sports. And I think the opportunity presents itself, and it's up to women to grab hold of that opportunity and step forward into that leadership moment. And I think when that happens, like you said, Christine, it's going to be like such a tidal wave and such an avalanche of movement and empowerment. And we've already seen that, right? We've already seen that happening in so many different ways for women. But I think when the opportunity presents itself, don't let it pass you by. Step into that moment, apply for that job. Will you get it? Who knows? You definitely won't get it if you don't apply. So I think it's more of the proactiveness that women need at this juncture in our lives right now. Like, we need everyone to take that step forward and be bold and confident in it.
Well, before we break, I feel like I have to say, you talk about 4 strong women in positions of authority. That's the last hour. So what an amazing conversation. And we're so grateful to the 4 of you for being a part of it. I'm charged up. You got me charged up. So thank you to the panel so much for being a part of the conversation tonight. I also want to thank Caitlin Wilson, the Assistant Director of the Povich Center, for her help tonight and fielding questions from the audience. And also Kate Yanchulis, who I mentioned earlier, she's live tweeting the event tonight. And I look forward to getting on Twitter and seeing her work tonight as well. So to the audience and the panel, thank you again. Hope to see you soon.